Hey Wargamers, welcome back. I've got another controversial Inner Sphere on Clan mech review. I remember the Summoner vs. Avatar generated so much conversation, so I took a little bit of a different path on this one. Instead of stacking up two mechs that are the same tonnage but wildly different battle values, I decided to look at mechs that were really filling the same niche on the battlefield. So we're going to look at two great ones tonight, the Vulture Prime and the Archer 5R. So the Vulture Prime, we know it, we love it. LRMs, lots of pulse lasers, great speed, all the clan goodness we know and love. And again, this is one of those excellent nostalgic designs that really underpins and is a staple of the clan invasion era. And then there's the Archer, right? I mean, this is nothing to sneeze at. This is another unseen, reseen, classic design, packing LRMs and two ER large lasers. Now, those LRMs are Artemis equipped, so that really should put it on par with that Vulture. But we're looking at like a 650, 700 point difference in battle value. I don't know. That Vulture's pretty mean, though. Which one's going to come out on top? I don't know, guys. Stay tuned. This is going to be a good one. You're not going to want to miss it. All right, this is going to be a good one. I really gave them the Battlytics engine a workout. So the Vulture Prime, a 60-ton clan heavy mech. It's a battle value of 2,351. So this is like your premium brand, classic, expensive as hell battle mech. This guy, for a little service history, produced in 2963. Which is, I think, on the later end, so to speak, of the clan chassis there. But this thing, iconic, persists forever, much like its other clan mech brethren there. And it has, multiple different alternate configurations available. Of course, the clan name for this is the Mad Dog. And I know sometimes I use the clan name, sometimes I use the Inner Sphere name. In my mind, this mech's always a Vulture, I think, because, they come out with the Vulture 2 and the Vulture 3 later, and they still call it a Vulture. So, hey, just wanted to tell you why I'm calling it a Vulture. Anyway, movement. So this thing's pretty quick for a 60-ton mech, on par with, like, the Dragon, right at a 5.8. It has a double strength heat sinks, 12 of them, so total dissipation of 24. It's got an XL fusion engine and packs 8.5 tons of clan ferrofibrous armor, so that's 163 points, 81.1%, not bad. No hand actuators on this mech, as we all know. Those are replaced with those sweet medium pulse laser arrays. The armor distribution on the mech looking pretty good, maybe a little bit light on the torsos as compared to the legs, but at the end of the day, I think first glance looking pretty good. Let's talk about the armament. 2 LRM-20s, 2 large pulse lasers, 2 medium pulse lasers, all clan variety, which means more damage, more range, just more nastiness, less critical slots. This thing packs a nasty punch for a 60-ton mech. The only real deficiency that I see here on the LRM-20 ammo, only 1 ton each, 6 shots. And, frankly, when I did this review, for some reason in my mind, I thought this thing had a lot more onboard ammo. I thought it had at least 2 tons per launcher, but was surprised to find only 6 rounds. So you can actually run this mech out of ammo pretty easily, which we'll look at later. But before we get there, let's take a look at the Archer. All right, so on to the Archer 5R, another classic. This is a 70-ton Inner Sphere heavy mech produced in 3050. Lasted about 50 years before it, sort of falls off the grid on master unit list. I don't know, again, if that's just a sort of a updating error or if the mech, actually does kind of go extinct and it's just out of production. But either way, this was designed, right at, again, the cusp of that clan invasion with all of the latest and greatest from the Helm memory core. A battle value, 1,672. So it's substantially cheaper than that Vulture. Can it compete? We'll find out in a minute. Movement profile of 4.6, so notably slower. Heat dissipation, very good. 12 double heat sinks at 24 points of heat dissipation there. The one thing I love about this chassis is the standard fusion engine. So sure, the XL save you a lot of weight, but you die a whole bunch more. So to me, the XL engine's almost never worth it. One of the reasons I like the upgraded Zeus as well, among many others. It does have an endo steel structure, so it saves a few tons there. And also, a notable difference from the 2R, the 5R is at 11.5 tons of armor. The 2R is maxed out. I believe it's got 14 tons at 100% coverage. This one at 84.8% coverage. But looking at the center armor diagram, looks pretty good. Pretty decent armor distribution there by percent. So we'll see how that shakes out in the defensive benchmarks. Weaponry. So this thing has 2 ER large lasers, 2 Artemis-equipped LRM-15s. It has case in both the left and the right torso, and it has 2 tons of ammo feeding each of those launchers. So pretty solid array. We'll have to see how it does against that Vulture. So let's dive into the offensive benchmarks. All right, so let's see how these guys stack up. That Vulture is mean, but can the Archer compete? The baseline says no. So the Vulture there in the gray, the Archer in the white. What you see here is both mechs working that heat meter a little bit, but that Vulture just simply outperforming that Archer by a little bit at long range. The Archer sort of jumping ahead at that 7-inch mark, and then that Vulture, once those, I guess those medium pulse lasers really come into their own, that thing just walks away with it. You know, I think also you've got a lot of minimum range issues with that, with the Archer, right? That still has ammo in the hoppers, where the Vulture, those LRM-20s are done. And so that's that. Vulture so far looking good. Now the red line benchmark is just like a mess. These mechs have ridiculous, even with 24 heat sinks, they build up an insane amount of heat. They have the capability to just, you could have a barbecue on this mech. It's crazy. So both mechs building up a ton of heat. Neither one really better than the other in terms of heat management. So, you know, you got to be careful with these mechs. They just build up a ton. The Archer overall builds up a little bit less heat, but again, that's only just a byproduct of the way the, you know, sort of the benchmark shakes out. I mean, both of these things can spike the heat meter in a heartbeat if you really want to. But that's a good thing, right? That makes the mech good, because a good pilot can work that, a good pilot can optimize that and find opportunities to deal more damage. When we played with the numbers in our optimized benchmark, we were able to squeeze quite a bit out of these mechs. Well, at least the Vulture. The Archer, not so much. But the Vulture we were able to squeeze quite a bit out of. Almost 22 extra points of damage. It's almost like a 10% bump or so, I believe, from the baseline to the optimized. The Archer, for whatever reason, I think just by the way, because the weapons are so big, and by that I mean they build up so much heat in one chunk, and it's sort of like right at the threshold of saturation with firing its weapons and moving, that if you fire one more thing, you're like, you know, you're going to take a damage penalty. So the way it worked out, the Archer, we were only able to tweak it a couple points. Really not a whole lot of gain there. I think so. 8 points actually says it on the right here. So if you look at the bottom and the key metrics, percent gain on the Vulture was 8.7%. On the Archer, just shy of 1%. So nothing great there. But the damage per heat on the Archer, you know, looking pretty good. But again, that's sort of an irrelevant metric when you compare the optimized ACD, the Vulture pumping out almost, you know, actually north of 80 more points of damage than that Archer over 12 turns. So ouch, that Vulture, that thing packs a punch. All right, so lethality, how did this shake out? So both of these mechs did pretty well. The Vulture actually took down the target 100% of the time. There was not a single of the 10,000 runs that we did that the Javelin survived. The Vulture just annihilated it every time. But the kill curve at the top really tells an interesting story, and you can see how much faster the Vulture kills, right? How much quicker it can bring down a target. It takes a really long time for that Archer to sort of spool up and get that damage going. That Vulture really can lay it down quick and fast. you know, those Clan LRM 20s versus the Artemis Inner Sphere Artemis 15s, and then, you know, those large pulse lasers. They're just devastating. You get that -2 to hit, which is huge. So anyway, I digress. But when we look at the kill analysis, left and right for each of these mechs, you know, not bad at the end of the day, right? The Vulture killing at 100% of the time, the Archer killing at 96.6. So still pretty good, but the time to kill, you know, really where it's at, right? The Vulture killing the Javelin on average 2 turns sooner than that Archer. So not bad, but again, you know, you're talking, what did we say? It's about a 600-point difference in battle value between these mechs. So is it worth it? I don't know. Let's take a look at the defensive side, and we'll see how these mechs shake out there. Okay, so survivability, these mechs very similar. So the Vulture, a little bit less armor, but, you know, it's got that Clan ferrofiber. So point for point, it's only got about, 21 points less of armor, right? Because again, I don't know if you guys know this, but the modifier for Clan ferrofibers is much higher than the Inner Sphere. And then when you're comparing that to standard Inner Sphere armor, you know, it's pretty darn good, ton for ton. So survivability 85.4 on the Vulture, 84.7 on the Archer. So actually, the Vulture just eking out in survivability there as well. And again, you know, the Archer, it does have, you know, 4 ammo bins, whereas the Vulture only has the 2. The other interesting thing is that the Archer has case in those side torsos, but no XL engine, right? So you can lose that side torso from an ammo explosion and stay in the fight. So you'll see that the Archer actually had no deaths from ammo explosions, courtesy of that, which is pretty good. The model does not take into account forced withdrawal or anything like that, because again, that's an optional rule. We know we play with it here at DFA, but that's not what this model is looking at. So really no deaths attributed to ammo, which is exactly what you want to see. On the engine death side, that Archer, just a little bit lower than the Vulture. So the Vulture, again, does have an XL engine, so it does have more susceptibility to engine deaths. But then when you look at the actual, you know, normal CT core out head deaths, the Archer doubles the Vulture. So pretty interesting how that shook out. But yeah, I mean, both these mechs are very tough. And if you look at the armor distribution in the middle, really no weak spots that jump out. You know, the Vulture, again, a little bit undergunned on the side torsos in the CT. And the Archer a little bit under-tunned on the legs there, under-armored, or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, I mean, really, these mechs are kind of neck and neck on the defensive benchmark so far. Next, we're going to go into mobility. I think I have a suspicion who's going to pull ahead in that one. All right, so here it is. Vulture, love that +3 mod when you run, really solid. The Archer, you know, really only claiming a +2, which is tough. And if you really want to push the mech and take on some heat, you know, that can drop really quickly. Motive hits on the Vulture much lower at 0.16. The Archer 0.47. I mean, really, like, it's pretty low regardless. Basically, what that means is the Archer, on average, you might see a half of an actuator. So like every 2 games you play, you're going to lose a leg actuator. It's pretty insignificant overall. Both of these mechs, again, you know, pretty well armored. They don't have any padding of critical slots in the legs, so it's just the actuators and roll again. So if you get internal on the legs, you're pretty much guaranteed, and you confirm, you're pretty much guaranteed to hamper their speed, which is pretty good for you, bad for them. And that's really about it. Not much to say. I mean, I think the degradation is similar between these mechs. You know, a little bit faster on the Archer. You know, if you were to kind of plot a slope, but, you know, again, that Vulture is just faster. That 5.8 over the 4.6, it's huge. And you know, you can really see it, even though the mech it's got less armor, right? We saw this in the defensive analysis. It survived a little bit more than the Archer, you know, so we know those target mods, they make a big difference in this game. All right, finally, the meat and potatoes were here, the efficiency analysis. I love this. So some really, really interesting stuff on this screen here. So first of all, the effectiveness, right? So we look at their survivability, it's the same, and then we sort of combine that with their optimized damage, and we come out with a net change. So what happened? Well, Vulture is kicking the Archer's butt. So the Vulture, as you remember, we were able to optimize at 8.7%, but that was like 22 points of damage. It only loses 4.6%. Again, both of these mechs very survivable. And so the net change is actually positive from baseline, even factoring in its survivability. That's pretty good. So the net change for the Vulture is plus 3.7%. The Archer was really interesting. Also lost exactly 4.6% to the survivability. Even though the percentages were slightly off, the way the numbers worked out, it turned out to be identical. I like triple checked the math. It just happened to be that. And remember, we were only able to optimize that one 0.9%. So the net loss there is actually minus 3.8%. So the Vulture went up 3.8% over baseline. The Archer went down, and the Vulture was already starting with a really good baseline to begin with. So pretty damn good. When we look at the efficiency rating, though, both of these mechs, pretty darn good. The Vulture, though, crushing it at an 8.05. So that's well above average. The Archer hanging in there at 7.88, so really not bad at all either. Both of these mechs, excellent buys. But man, that Vulture is expensive. And I say that because let's look at the gunnery sensitivity. This was really interesting to me. So up until this point, I'm like, Vulture all the way, love it. But now I'm like, whoa, check this out. So gunnery sensitivity, horrendously low on the Vulture. And so that makes me pause, right? Why would that number be so low? Well, here's the reason. The mech basically has a metric ton of pulse lasers, which are super easy to hit with. Remember, you get that -2 target number when you're firing with a pulse laser. So like you put the best gunner in the world, and like the difference to hit between like a 5 and a 3, it's like whoop-de-doo, like you're not doing a whole lot. So like you're paying though all these points, because remember it's 2,300 points or 2,351 BV. You know, you're going to start hitting that by 120, 140, 160% or whatever it might be. When you start putting a clan pilot in there, it's like, oh, you don't really get any return on investment. In fact, it's almost a linear return. So if you look at the gunnery sensitivity analysis there on the right, and you look at the light purple line, which is representative of that Vulture, you know, 7.33, 7.75, 8.05, 8.07, 8. There's very little gain in terms of efficiency from paying that premium, you know, for the extra piloting, which, you know, you don't want that. Compare that to the Archer. This thing has a point, what is it, 0.866? That's super high. That's, I think, one of the highest ones I think I've ever seen. And that's because it can do so much damage at range. So if you look at the slope of that line, and it was really cool to be able to overlay these, you can see like you can really get a decent return on an investment for that Archer. And now I'm going to make it sound like I'm going back to the Summoner Avatar thing, but you know, you can put a better gunner in the Archer and it could be on par or slightly better than that Vulture. I mean, you know, look at a Gunnery 1, and I know some of you guys are going to be like, who plays Gunnery 1? But suspend your disbelief for a moment. You know, if you look at a Gunnery 1 or Gunnery 0 Archer, that's like 8.54, 9.21 respectively for the efficiency. That's really, really high. And then if you look at, again, that Vulture, you know, it's basically capping out at 8.13. So pretty interesting to see. This doesn't mean that the Archer is, you know, by far a better mech, but if you were playing a game of classic BattleTech and, you know, you say to your buddy, hey, we're going to play 4,000 BV, you know, it makes you kind of wonder, like, you know, are you going to get that return past Gunnery 2 on your Vulture? I would say not. I would absolutely play the Vulture at Gunnery 2. I would not pay a penny more for better gunnery on that mech. Meanwhile, the Archer, that's a mech you could put, you know, your commander in or your super elite dude, and you could definitely reap some serious benefits from that, and really outperform. Again, you know, you're going to be heat constrained, but you're going to be hitting with those ER large and those Artemis 15s. You're going to be doing a lot of damage with them. So pretty interesting to see that. That was a very interesting result here from the engine. So all my nerd excitement aside, let's take a look at the threat. for the Vulture Prime by range. This thing, there's bars everywhere. This thing does a tremendous amount of damage for a 60-ton mech, in my opinion. And I think this is probably one of the better clan chassis that we looked at in terms of what you get bang for buck. But let's take a look at the zero heat ACD. So the zero heat ACD, again, this is when you build up no heat. What can you do? It caps out at 4 inches, 34.8. That's when your medium pulse lasers can come into play, and you really get a good return on investment for heat for damage. But look at the Alpha Strike, 74 points of damage at 12 inches. Now this is if the dice gods favor you and all your missile clusters hit, right? You max out, you hit 40 missiles, but still, like, it's a ton of damage that you could potentially rip out with this mech. Of course, the expensive 17 points of heat, that's astronomical. So you got to be careful with that. I mean, yes, it has a ton of Alpha Strike potential, but at the risk of potentially blowing yourself up. So how did it shake out? Overall, optimized ACD 277.7, time to kill 6.3. And there it is, redline heat 276. I mean, just an absurd amount of heat build up for this mech. Let's look at the threat envelope. So the one thing I love about the Vulture, it's got the medium lasers and the large lasers, pulse of course, on each arm, right? So you can turn, you can swivel, you've got great arc of fire. And remember, with the pulse lasers, you get that -2 target mod, so it's very easy to make a secondary target and eat that +1 penalty and just nuke somebody that's almost dead while you fire your missiles at somebody that's further away. Whatever you want to do, it's got really great arc of fire again. So I really like that about this mech. When I think about how I would play this mech, what role I would put it in. So first and foremost is a frontline mech to me. It's tough, it's fast, it can control different parts of the battlefield. It can be successful at long range, at medium range, at short range as well. So it really meets the criteria for me of a frontline mech. Cavalry. So again, speed. Fire those LRMs as fast as you can, dump out the ammo hoppers, and then get in with those pulse lasers and just start carving things up. I think that's absolutely a viable use for this mech. And then skirmisher. So this mech is fast, it's capable on the flank. No one is going to be able to ignore it. You can fire, the 2 large pulse, 2 LRM-20s, and do just a ton of damage. And people have to respond to that. They have to do something about that. So this mech is excellent on a flank. And if it does get boxed in, or you sense like you're getting caught in a trap, it's so fast, 5'8" for a 60-ton mech. I mean, it can tear back and reconnect with the rest of the star and would be good to go. So anyway, that's the Vulture. Let's take a look at the Archer. All right, so clearly the red bars here are not as big as the Vultures, but as they say, size does not matter, but it really does, because the Archer just cannot compete with the savage damage output of the Vulture. So basically, what do we have here? Well, we have a zero heat ACD of 25.8, and that's at 7 inches. That's really when those LRM-15s, just before they go into minimum range. The Alpha Strike capability, though, this is a really, to me, the big feature that separates the Archer from the Vulture, and stylistically why you would play these mechs differently. The Archer has a 46-point Alpha Strike. Again, that's if all 30 missiles hit, you land both lasers. That's at 19 inches, though. So at 19 inches, as soon as those large lasers come into play, you're at peak Alpha Strike potential. That's awesome. The Vulture had to wait until it gets into 12 inches to hit its Alpha Strike potential. So to me, that is a point of advantage to that Archer. Even though the Vulture is a destroyer of worlds, I think the Archer really is, again, much better in the backfield, as sort of indicated here by the threat analysis. It also builds up less heat when you Alpha Strike. I mean, 11 points versus 17. 11 is still awful. You're going to be taking on a gunnery penalty. Obviously, MP is going to be hit pretty substantially. But again, you can sort of throttle that a little bit as well. You can fire both lasers in one launcher, both launchers in one laser, and then cool off. You can bait and switch, whatever you need to do. But again, optimize ACD 193. So that was substantially less, over 80 points less than the Vulture. Red line heat, still very hot. Survival rate about the same. Arc of fire, pretty good. It's got the ER large on the arms. It's got those missiles mounted forward. So very similar to the Archer in terms of the architecture of the mech. But again, just when it comes to the damage output, it's just not the same. But when I think about rolls, very, very different than the Vulture. And one of the reasons I like this comparison is because honestly, going into this, I was like, this is a fire support shootout. But really, the Vulture's not a fire support mech at all. The Archer is a fire support mech. 100% would play it in that role. I would keep it in the backfield. You can capitalize on, the heat and the extra damage, right? You can make that trade because you may not need to move as much. It's still tough. It still has lots of armor. You can also play a defender role pretty well. Again, almost 85% survivability on this mech. If you get punched through on one of the side torsos, just dump the ammo. That'll jack that survivability up even more. But really, it was interesting, right? I came into this, I was like, hey, these are two really strong fire support mechs. But the numbers show me that's not how you play the Vulture. And in retrospect, having looked at the weapons loadout, maybe I should have realized that, but it was really cool to see how that shook out in the numbers. So if I had to compare the Archer to the Vulture, I think the Vulture is going to win every time, right? I think the Vulture is faster, it does more damage, it can survive just a little bit better, but really just does so much damage, oh my goodness. And those pulse lasers, that's the trick, right? So the ACD is factoring that in. You're just going to be hitting all the time. But then again, if you play the Archer right and you're playing, point for point, an Archer with a better pilot, a better gunner, hanging in the backfield a little bit longer, trying to kite that Vulture as best as you can, I don't know. Maybe it's a close fight. Guys, very interested to know what you think. What's your favorite and why? So that's it, though. I'm wrapping this one up. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this fire support shootout. Even though the one mech wasn't really much of a fire support mech, still pretty cool to see how these guys sort of paired up. As I mentioned, thanks very much to our sponsor, Ares Games and Minis, guys. If you're looking to get your hands on a shiny new Archer, or perhaps a Vulture or a Vulture 3, you can head over to Ares Games and Minis. They've got all of these sweet miniatures for you to pick up and add to your very own Lance or Star. So that said, that's all I got. Always more coming from Death from Above Wargaming. Don't forget to subscribe. Stay tuned. Have a great night.